From the Oregon State University Extension Service, this is Pollination, a podcast that tells the stories of researchers, land managers, and concerned citizens making bold strides to improve the health of pollinators. I'm your host, Dr. Adoni Melathopoulos, Assistant Professor in Pollinator Health in the Department of Horticulture.
Fortunately, in 2022, we finally were able to get out to the public to talk about pollinators. And I can think of no better event in some ways than an event that was held in May by the Washington County Master Gardeners at the PCC Rock Creek demonstration garden they have. The event was called Meet the Mason Bees and Their Friends and was designed around the wonderful demonstration garden they had there. It was a glorious day, and I got to meet some friends that I hadn't seen in a while. To begin with, we have Martha Richards and Carol Yamada. Both are members of the Oregon Bee Atlas who are out catching bees and showing them to the public. Then we have Ron Spendle, and many of you remember Ron. He's the Mason bee guru of Oregon, and he has this amazing demonstration, not hive, but domicile setup that you can just slide the door and watch the mason bees as they work. Ron has made some very detailed observations, remarkable to science, using these, but as a public education tool, they're really amazing. We then have Missy Martin. Missy Martin has written the book on outreach and engagement on pollinators, and she kind of gave us a quick rundown of a very easy game that you can play with anybody called the 6-5-4-3-2-1 game for pollinators. And finally, we have Susan Albright. Susan is really well organized and a real powerhouse. She's a Washington County Master Gardener, but she's also a Master Melitologist with the Oregon Bee Atlas. So she kind of wears both hats. She's going to walk us around the garden, which is remarkable. And it sort of was built up from nothing, a sort of industrial site that they've built the garden around. But also, we get an opportunity to hear about what kind of constitutes successful outreach and engagement around pollinators at the end of the episode. I think, as I've always said on the show, master gardeners are the front lines of pollinator education and outreach, and I'm glad to bring you this episode, perhaps a little belatedly, but as summer is coming to a close, it's a great opportunity to reflect on a wonderful year, finally, of public outreach and engagement. This week on Pollination.
Hey, Martha.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Good.
So you have been at this event here at PCC Rock Creek doing the Catch, Observe, and Release table. Tell us a little bit about how that goes.
Well, we have a table with a display of bees that are pinned so that people can see all the different bees that live in Oregon, or at least a sampling of them.
Yeah.
And then we also have our nets with us, and we can go out and catch a bee and put it in a small jar, and people can look at the bee in the jar. And then we let it go.
I imagine for a lot of people, they've never had a bee that close, like in their hand, even though the vial is separating things out.
Yeah, and sometimes we cool the bee down just a little bit so it'll slow.
Yeah.
And they get to see some pretty neat bee action.
And what's this is a beautiful garden. There's lots of things blooming, lots of things coming into bloom. What have you been finding bees on?
Well, there's a big ceanothus bush over there.
It's beautiful.
Gorgeous in full bloom. Mostly only seems to have honeybees with a few mason bees here and there.
Okay.
And a few bumblebees, but the honeybees seem to really be flocking to that. And then there are some lavender plants that have been attracting a nice set of bumblebees. And then off and away, kind of out of the garden, there's a little bit of phacelia. And I caught a Bombus flavifrons off of it.
Oh, you did?
I did, yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, I imagine you get lots of questions when, suddenly a bee is in in someone's hands and they've got questions. What kind of questions have you been running into today?
A lot of people want to know how many bees make honey, which, of course,
of course,
only the non-native honeybee makes honey.
Yeah.
So that's always a surprise to people that most bees don't
They must
make.
be just dumbfounded when you say, there's 700 species and none of them make honey. They were like, what's wrong with them?
Yeah. Well, I did have one visitor ask, why do we have bees? What's the point?
Yeah.
And I
What did you tell them?
well, I said they're such fascinating insects. I mean, they're just cool. But of course, also they do a lot of pollination.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have seeds and fruits without bees. So that was the real answer. But the fun answer is they're really neat.
Well, I guess, being at the garden, one of the things that people must, come up in their mind is, having, getting a pollinator garden going. Did you get any questions about like the plants and?
Well, we also have packets of seeds that are good for attracting bees because they have a lot of flowers in them.
Oh yeah, right beside the bee collection there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And a couple people have said, well, gosh, I don't really want to plant these flowers because I don't want to attract bees and get stung. Or I live next to a school and I don't want the school kids to get stung.
Right, okay.
So I've been telling people that, first of all, only the females sting, not the males.
Yeah.
And second of all, most bees don't really want to sting people.
Yeah.
They only do that to protect their nest or if they're feeling threatened. And so if they're just kind of buzzing around and collecting their food and the pollen and the nectar, they don't want to be disturbed and they're more focused on the flower than the people, and they're not going to sting you.
I can also imagine, and that's the nice thing about having the actual insects there, is that most people, when they think of a stinging bee, they think of a yellow jacket comes to mind.
Yeah, exactly. And those do tend to be a little more aggressive.
Yeah.
But the bees, they're mostly just, they want to do their own flying thing and get around, but they don't really want to sting people unless you're disturbing their nest.
Well, Martha, thank you so much. I'll let you get back to collecting bees for people here at PCC Rock Creek, and good luck.
Oh, thanks. Good to talk to you.
All right, Carol, hi, welcome to Pollination.
Hi.
So you've been doing the Catch a Bee thing today. How's that gone for you?
It's really fun. People, they're so afraid of bees, and then you can really tell them how gentle the bee is and show them the bee, and they calm down, and it's good for the bees.
Were you surprised by anybody? Did anybody show up that was kind of like, they kind of had it all dialed in? Or most people that you encounter that just like, because, bees are in the news.
Bees are in the news. Most people that I talked to really hadn't considered native bees at all.
Yeah.
And they didn't realize that a honeybee is the only bee that makes honey, and that nobody else does, and that the rest are just wild.
Oh, they probably also, the solitary, the fact that many species are solitary, they probably want to know where the queen is.
Yeah, somebody said, I have to start a mason bee house, but I need a mason bee queen.
Oh!
I was like,
It would be reasonable to think that. You think, you come from beekeeping, it's like, I'm going to go to the Wilco and they're going to have the package and whatever. Different system. Okay,
exactly.
Fantastic. What have been some of the plants that you've been visiting here today? I've heard about the ceanothus was full of honeybees.
There's the ceanothus, which is full, and the phlox.
Yeah.
And that's basically where I've seen most of the bees.
Well, I guess coming up to the event, the lead up to the event, people were worried because it's been raining in Western Oregon, but we have a beautiful day here today.
It is so rare. We've had like 5 days of rain, and it was 35 degrees when I woke up yesterday morning.
Yikes!
I know, it was so cold, but today is like, 70 almost? It's beautiful, and the sun is shining. It's a great day.
Well, if you were to give advice to one of our listeners who's trying to do some outreach and education, what's kind of your, do you have any kind of like key tips? Like, here's my 101.
Nothing's more exciting than a live bee. They just, their spirit is in the jar buzzing around, and they're so excited. When you kill a bee, that kind of goes away. So if you are able to catch a bee and have it for people to look at, that's a real selling point for bees. And it raises up all these questions. Like, why is there purple on their legs? Well, because it's purple pollen today.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much, Carol, and good luck with the rest of the event today.
Thanks, Emily.
right. Well, hi, Ron. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
Nice to see you. And what a strange year for mason bees.
Very strange. It's kind of become the new normal for Oregon is that we usually have a fake spring where suddenly everything looks nice and warm and people get all excited about planting and putting their mason bee cocoons out. And then we immediately drop back into winter conditions. And this year we actually had 2 fake springs. So the first go around, a lot of the males who had emerged early died. And those that survived got pretty well beaten up by the second wave back into winter. So it's been a real hard year for the mason bees.
Yeah, and I suppose everybody just holding some cocoons back all the time and just, spacing them out their emergence, eh?
Yeah, basically if you can hold your cocoons so that you've got 2 or 3 waves to set out, that seems to be the way to go. Or to try to make sure that you refrigerate your cocoons so that you can wait until you actually see things in bloom and the temperature's up enough that they'll be okay, and then you can set them out. Because it takes only about 24 hours for them to get up to ambient temperature, and then everything's fine.
Now, this event today is mason bees are kind of the anchor of the day, but it's more broader than that. And we had you on a past episode, but you've got here at PCC Rock Creek, you got a number of these observation nesting stations. Tell us a little bit how the volunteers here work with the public to sort of talk about those nest stations.
One of the things I noticed at Jackson Bottom Wetlands, where I've got my mason bee nesting stations about 10 feet inside of a fenced area where the fence is about 3 feet tall. So people could walk up to the fence and look out and see the mason bee activity at those nests. Occasionally I would notice when I arrived there that people were on the other side of the fence pulling out the trays in the mason bee nesting station to look at it. Basically out of curiosity. They weren't trying to do any harm to the mason bees, but they didn't know that you couldn't treat the trays very rough because you might knock the egg off the pollen pile, or they didn't know they have to keep the trays in the same order because the mason bees memorize their nesting channel by location. So I thought there must be a way to involve the public but protect the mason bees. So over the course of a couple of years, I experimented with an observable nesting station where someone could walk up and slide a door back and look at the mason bees nesting in a protected environment where you could have clear plastic between you and the mason bee. You could actually put your finger up to within about 1/4 of an inch of the mason bee, and then you could slide the darker colored door back shut when you were done, which was good for the mason bees because they like to nest in the dark. So I finally came up with a design that seems to work fairly well with 2 large trays, one on each side. And the kids seem to really like to be able to slide the door open and get up so their noses are right up there where the bees are, and they can see the bees building nesting cells and look at where the eggs are and how that works. And then later see the larvae and the larvae spinning into cocoons. So they can get really up close to it.
Let's say you've got, I'm sure you've done this about a dozen times today. But somebody comes up, they slide back the door. How do you walk them through? What are the first things? Because I imagine for many of them, we were just talking with Carol about how somebody asked them, "I want to get started with mason bees, but where do I get the queen?" So people really don't have a good understanding. So tell us about you're with somebody, they open it up for the first time. How do you walk them through? How do you direct their attention?
The first thing when they slide it open, the first thing that seems to impress them is all of the bright yellow pollen. They want to know what that is, where it came from, and you explain that the bees are bringing the pollen and nectar back into the nesting tray. And then that really kicks off their questions about, well, why are they putting the little pollen into this little pea-sized ball? And you explain that that's the provision for the nesting cell, and you point out where eggs have been laid in nesting cells, and they see the little thing that looks like a little tiny rice pellet, and you explain that that's the egg. And you kind of quickly walk through the life cycle about the egg will hatch into a larva. The larva will eat that pollen pile and then eventually spin a cocoon around itself. So you can kind of quickly walk through the whole life cycle of the mason bee while they're looking at it and kind of seeing how it's all progressing. And that leads to other questions, like on the nesting tray, where there's 13 channels for the bees to be nesting in. They want to know how come the bee knows that that's its channel. And you explain that they mark it with a pheromone, and they're all pretty much oriented to what's going on with their channel, and that's all they pay their attention to. And in the wild, they would be practicing social distancing, and they wouldn't be nesting in a congregate fashion like they are in a nesting station. And you kind of explain how that whole concept works, and the fact that because you are bringing them all together into a kind of a commune, you're responsible as a diligent beekeeper to then clean the cocoons, because you've created a density of mason bees that have become a target for parasites. So you've got a responsibility then to correct the environment that you've created so that it works out to everybody's benefit.
Now, I also see sitting beside you there, I've heard you talk about this in the past, but you have little cards that I imagine as you're walking around a garden space, you can sort of refer to. Tell us a little bit about those cards.
Because we've got a lot of these observable bee stations now in public locations, and kids really like them, and they're looking at them more and more. And I've got a couple of stations set up at some elementary schools in Hillsboro. I decided to come up with a bunch of different, I call them baseball cards.
And they are the size of a baseball card.
They're the size of a baseball card. And basically it's pictures of different bees that I've taken over time, and an explanation on the back of the card about what the picture depicts, what kind of bee it is, and if it's a male or a female.
Perfect.
So that even if they can't read the material on the back, because some of the words might not be familiar to them, they can take them home and have their kids or their parents read them to them, or take them to school and have the teacher read them, which presents more of an interest on the teacher's part. But they can learn all about different kinds of bees and basically get a whole set of cards. So I've got 5 sets of cards. There's 9 pictures in each set, so that's 45 different cards they can collect.
Is any one of the cards like more popular than the others?
Because all of the sites that I've got set up focus more on mason bees, they ask a lot more questions about the mason bees, because they can look at the card and match it to the living bee, as it's flying around, and that seemed to make a lot more connection for them. So that seems to help a lot.
Well, fantastic, Ron. Thanks so much for taking time, and this is a wonderful event. I'm so glad to be here today.
I'm glad the weather held up. We're doing well.
All right, I'm here with the great Missy Martin. Hi.
Hi, I'm Doni. Gosh, it's good to see you.
Well, we were just talking, it's been a hard pandemic and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And this is like the first, you sort of wrote the book on how to do outreach to the public. And so you're finally at a public outreach event.
Yes, and I can hardly hold myself back. Every kid I see, I'm saying, okay, what has 6 legs? What has, et cetera, and they get to answer B to everything, A bee has 6 blank, a bee has 5 blank, a bee has 4 blank. And they're looking at the bees.
Yeah.
And one little girl will say 6 for the legs, and then for some reason these kids know that bees have 5 eyes. I've had so many kids say eyes. So they've learned that somewhere, because you can't see that when you're looking at the bees.
What's the 3?
Well, the 3 is body parts.
Oh,
yeah.
Geez.
Head,
Okay.
middle, abdomen, yep. And then 2, I say,
lots of them.
you're wearing it.
Yeah.
Their antenna.
Yeah.
And then 1, that really stumps people.
what
And
is
of course,
the 1?
it's a little stinger. Oh, for females.
Well, I have seen everybody's sporting these great antennas. As soon as they come in, they
Right.
get an antenna set.
Right.
Well, that's a great. I never thought about that. 6, 5, 3,
4, 3,
2,
2, 1. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's just my go-to, And so I was glad I remembered
I imagine there's some people here who this is their first time doing this, and they're kind of worried. How do I carry a conversation on with somebody, completely
Right.
strange? And I guess that is a challenge for some people. What are your tips to people who are starting out?
To take them to a plant and start looking to see what's hovering there, and then and take it from there. You start talking about bees and flies and wasps, and and just to watch people realize that they can see what they're looking at, and that it's not there accidentally. That if it's on a plant, it's there on purpose. On the flower,
Yeah.
it's there on purpose. Another thing that I have encouraged people to do is to because often we're as shy as the people we're talking to.
Yeah, right.
So
Yeah.
it's a two-way thing. And just ask them if they have a garden. And what are you growing? And have you ever noticed on the flowers? And have you ever noticed on some flowers you don't ever see bees?
And what have you heard today when you've asked that question?
Oh, immediately. So some people have really been looking
Yeah.
and have a lot to say, and other people say, I never knew that there were wasps on flowers. I never knew that there were flies on flowers. In fact, I didn't even know that all of those other things were bees. So, that's the aha. That's the spark. People just love actually knowing something, owning a piece of
Oh, isn't that
knowledge.
true? That's right,
Yes,
yeah.
that's what they love. Yeah.
Has anybody surprised you today?
Oh, I'll say. I'll say.
Wow.
Well, yeah. Well, yeah. These little girls that all knew that bees had 5 eyes,
Yeah.
and that blew me away. But then another thing on another note was not a naturalist thing, but this boy came up to us afterwards
Yeah.
and said, and he was just like this.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you so much for putting this together for the bees. And I started taking pictures as fast as I could, and then he circles back around and he says, if someone asked me what I wanted to be when I grow up, I would say I want to be an entomologist.
Yes.
Click, 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 And then we got to share with him one thing he didn't know, because he knew an awful lot, and that was that a person that specifically studies bees is a melitologist. And that it comes from the word honey. It's a European word, and then people link that up.
That is fantastic.
Isn't
It's
that-
really wonderful.
Yeah.
And it's really, it's been terrible weather in Oregon, and there are a bunch of people here today. This is so well organized.
I'm amazed at the organization that the Master Gardeners accomplished for this day, and we've had a steady crowd all day, just the right number, families mostly, who are looking for anything to do to get outside today.
Well, and I guess it's the first annual, so it's kind of like,
Yeah. Yeah.
starting the conversation off. But it's such a great location.
Couldn't be better. A
Yeah.
native garden that's specifically developed to show off the mason bees and all of the different ways that people can manage mason bees, as well as what they can grow in their gardens.
Yeah.
The wild native plants that are flowering that will support the bees.
Well,
Yeah.
fantastic, Missy. I'm so glad to come across you here
Yes.
today, and on
Always
a
a
beautiful,
treat, Ando.
rare, sunny day.
No kidding. No kidding. And the bees noticed that too. Well, thank you so much.
So this is the first annual. What is this called again?
Well, we
Meet
changed
the
it.
Mason Bees.
Meet the Mason Bees
Okay.
and some of their closest friends, but it was too long a title, so now we're going to shorten it to Meet the Mason Bees and Friends.
I like it. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Not their closest friends, just the wide friends.
Right,
Okay.
right.
All right. Awesome. So, and this is looking, especially after like solid rain. We've got a great crowd here today. Steady number of people, really well organized. Maybe just to start with, before getting into the event.
Yes.
Because it's a Master Gardener organized event.
Right.
just tell us a little bit about this master. So master gardeners have demonstration gardens across the state.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is one of them.
Yes. Yes.
Tell us about this one.
Okay, so I'm just going to back up a little bit because in Washington County, Master Gardeners, we have 2 demonstration gardens. One is at Jenkins Estate, and they have some similar things to us, but they also have fruits and vegetables. We don't do any food production here.
Oh, right. And they used to have the one at the fairground that got turfed.
Yes.
Okay.
That's, I was president when that happened.
Okay.
But that's a whole other story.
Okay.
But anyway, so the Jenkins Estate was established, and PCC had approached us, PCC Rock Creek, about, would you be interested in a garden here? We'd love to have you. So in 2018, we signed an MOU with them, and we started the garden. And so to
2018.
2018.
This looks great.
Yes.
Holy.
Yes.
Wow.
So when we first looked at the garden, it looked a lot like the parking lot over there, minus the semis that are now parked there. So basically what our soil was 2 to 3 inches of 3/4 inch gravel on top of about 10 inches of riprap rock and landscape fabric under that, because this was a construction site housing for heavy equipment for about 6 years.
Oh.
So we thought, this is perfect for a garden. Lots of rock, compacted soil. So long story short, through PCC and who helped us with a lot of things, we were able to actually excavate out all of the rock from the bed areas that we were going to have. Cost us $0 through, which was fabulous.
Amazing.
Our initial thought was going to be $30,000.
Yeah.
But anyway, so got that going, had soil donated, brought that in, and then it was a lot of hard, hot work, and with some help from PCC, they loaned us equipment, and we put the first plants in the ground in fall kind of 2018. Half of the garden is overhead irrigated, half of it is drip irrigation.
Yeah.
And we have several beds in the garden. So we have a water-wise garden area, we have insect and pollinator habitat, we have a fragrance garden, and then in the very center, there are 3 beds that feature different conifers that could be grown in the home garden. So our goal here was to demonstrate plants that you could readily find in nurseries and how you might group them together in your home garden. So then it's been amazing how fast it has grown here. I mean, we have been amazed at all of that. So,
and I just one quick thing. I love the way, like, I like the concept of it. Is like, here we're going to take an area and we're going to give you a coherent garden design. And I notice you even have these really wonderful wrought metal or plasma cut signs. That look really. They don't look like a tentast, corrugated cardboard.
Right.
This is like a really attractive sign that kind of frames up this part of the garden.
Yeah, those were something that Sue researched, because we said we really want some nice signs. And so there was this place in Chico, California we found, and we have like a Chamaecyparis bed, and they sent us a design, and we said, that doesn't really look like a Chamaecyparis. Here's the kinds of things you need to include. So they customized little pieces that they put on the signs, and we're just thrilled with them. I think they're great. So the last thing that we did, and this was kind of, when we first were planning the garden, I kept saying, we need a hedgerow, and everyone was like, yeah, Susan, okay, yeah, but we weren't quite ready for it. But this strip was just nothing, and so we, just this last fall, planted the hedgerow. We, excavated out. It's all Oregon natives with an emphasis on drought-tolerant plants.
Wonderful.
We didn't put any trees because we had the same similar soil situation. So we mounded up and looked at what plants would be able to live in 3 to 4 feet of soil and still get adequate nourishment and water and so on.
What do we got here?
So we have Oregon grape, we have snowberry, we have kinnick, we have some stonecrop. Down here, we have 2 beds with pollinator plants, and what we did was tapped into the studies that Gail Langolato did with Jen Hayes and Aaron Anderson.
Yeah.
And looked at their top 10 choices and said, hey, let's just go
so
with
they're
those.
here.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. So we put some in with seeds, some plants, and so this is kind of its first year, so we're going to see how that all goes. And then we have Oregon grape, maybe I mentioned that. We have, the biggest thing we have that's not big yet is the western serviceberry. We also put in some grasses. And then we put in rocks, and we're leaving bare places for ground nesting bees,
Okay.
branch piles, and again, kind of a demonstration for people of what you can do in your garden.
Oh yeah, you've got these nice, right in the center, you've got these two
big logs.
logs.
So the beauty of working here at PCC, the ground crew here, I said, I heard you guys cut down a tree, I want some, do you have any logs? And they go, well, those won't work, but we think we have some. Well, within 15 minutes, they're driving up and they go, would these two work? So all the rocks and things you see here were things from PCC. So we're able to get a lot of stuff for free, which is great.
Is that 9 bark over there? What's the taller thing there? No.
In the center?
No, right there.
Oh, this one?
Oh yeah.
That's Ribes sanguineum, red
right.
flowering
Okay.
currant.
Oh, yeah.
And then we have some penstemon, Davidsonii. We have some ferns, and then we put in some camas. One of the things that we're trying to do, because Master Gardeners, one of their missions is to bring in cultural and historical topics, and so we thought, well, this was a plant that was important to the Kalapuyan tribe, who were indigenous to this area. So several of our Master Gardeners went through training on diversity training that they did, and so Jack Shore, who's one of our Master Gardeners, has done a presentation on the camas and what its significance was to the local indigenous people who were here. So we have Oregon grape, ceanothus, as we're moving on down, some thrift, some more grasses, and then so we have a debate always, so here's some weeds growing up in there, but that's an awesome place for beetles to hang out. So part of it is, if you can learn to live with a little bit of that kind of stuff in your yard, you have to kind of keep on top of it, but weeding around that's a hassle. And I think one of the things that I really like to show people in the garden is kind of rethinking, first of all, what is a garden for? Who is it for? And if I look at a garden and I don't see things buzzing around and flying or insects burrowing in the ground, that has no attraction to me. It's the life and the birds and the wildlife and whatever that really make it a difference. So we've talked about getting rid of some of these weeds, but then on the other hand, I think, well, if we can kind of keep them from encroaching too much.
Well, one thing I really like as well, because there's always this debate about mulch, right?
Right.
You take the mulch, no ground nesting bees. Clearly, there's a lot of places for ground nesting bees to nest, and you kind of want to keep this, keep the water in and all that stuff.
Yes.
But you kind of created some spots
Right.
where they're nesting, and not like gone like, oh, we're getting rid of all the mulch.
Exactly.
And then we got a water problem and all that. Yeah.
And I think there's one of the things that we've also been, so the mulch that we use here is all just wood chips, from trees that have been cut down. And, you're never too old to learn. I've been in Master Gardeners a long time, and it didn't even occur to me, when people use bark dust, you think about the role of bark on a tree is like the moisture barrier.
Oh, yeah.
So you put it in your yard, well, do you really want to keep the moisture from going down into the soil? No, but the wood chips decompose, and over time they break down.
There's spaces for the water to go through. I never even thought of
I
that.
hadn't even thought about it either, and it was like, duh, So anyway, this is all free, and then as I was reading more, and we were about how you don't need to leave huge swaths of bare ground for the bees.
Yeah.
But to have some things strategically placed here and there.
Especially, I love this area. I can just see this area around the sedums just being
Yes.
like this. It's got the rock there. It's nice and hot. I can just see them just like making little nests
I
all
hope
around
so.
there.
I was thinking of putting a little welcome or come here, build your home here. So what actually got us started thinking about, and as I've been in Oregon Bee Atlas and learned more about where they, they kind of like a sort of slope. They like it facing on the south. And we have a part on the edge of our garden where I noticed one day we've got ground nesting bees because the mulch had washed away and it was everything was perfect. So that got us thinking. So when you talked about the metal signs, we want to make some signs that say, don't mulch here, leave space for the bees. Anyway, so it's been a lot of fun, and just we'll sort of see how it progresses. I'm looking forward to a couple years.
Well, what about that there?
Oh, okay. So we're here on the PCC campus. And the PCC campus, prior to COVID, this is their learning garden, totally fruits and vegetables. And they have, they have orchards, they have blueberries over there. They used to have raised beds with blueberries, and this time of year, they would have had it planted, and they planted like a whole big thing with pumpkins because they did a harvest fest. They do around Cinco de Mayo, Dia de los Muertos. They have grown the big marigolds, but because of COVID and cutbacks, this PCC campus had the most strict COVID protocols. They had no students to do this, so this is basically kind of laying fallow for a couple of years. You can see some Phacelia coming up.
That's what attracted my attention. Okay.
Yeah, so a couple years ago, they put in, and it was just a mass of Phacelia, which was cool. So for us, we have been able to utilize, for example, we do blueberry pruning. They didn't have anybody to prune the blueberries, so we were able to utilize their plants to demonstrate pruning and care of blueberries. So it's just been a terrific partnership with the Landscape Technology Department. We've now, there's someone in the biology department that I've been in touch with to find out about collecting bees out on the wetland out over behind the campus. On the north side of this campus, there's a whole wetland area that Clean Water Services manages. So
I guess, the thing, I was recently on there was a National Bee Monitoring Network meeting, and Gail was talking, Gail Lungalotto, our headmaster, and she pointed out that a large proportion of people in the Master Melitologist program are Master Gardeners, and that must equip you in some ways. It gives you a really great skill set for talking about bee conservation. Tell us a little bit about that connection of like Master Gardeners and people who are Master Melitologists.
Yeah. Well, and it was we have a program where we have speakers who come and talk to our chapter members. And I can't remember the year, but Rich Hatfield from Xerxes Society came and talked about bumblebees. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to do this. So I went to his training and did the Bumblebee Atlas for 2 years, and then through that found out about Oregon Bee Atlas, and then came in 2020 the COVID conference, right? We call it, and got involved from there, and it's been an obsession ever since.
Well, what about this connection? Because you have this, I think, Master Gardeners are exemplary in terms of public service and really taking serious the charge of like helping the public, the land grant mission. Having both hats, how does that kind of like shape your approach to things?
Well, for me, what I've found, first of all, bees, pollinators, invertebrates are all really important to gardening. And I think the way I kind of balance the two is I believe that Master Gardeners in the past, it was all about vegetable gardening. How do you make a nice lawn? How do you do that? I don't see that as a sustainable piece. I think we really need to look at what are our water resources, what is the best use for our land, and what can we do to promote that to people. So when I look at some of the things that people are probably not going to like this, but roses I am not a rose fan. I'm just here to tell you, way too much care. And my thing is, if it isn't something that really is beneficial to some kind of invertebrate, That's my rule in my home garden. So I am slowly getting rid of some things in my home garden that, it's like, okay, what's your purpose? You're a lot of work and you don't give anything back to the wild.
You're gone.
Yeah, you're out of there. Tough love, But I just think, why put water resources into something that isn't giving some benefit back?
Yep.
So that's kind of my mantra.
Last question.
Yes.
So this mason bees and their closest friends.
Yes.
First annual. Are you expecting to do this again? It sounds like
We would love to.
Yeah.
Plus, the amount of work that it took to pull the activities together. I wasn't going to do this if it was going to be a one-off, and this all kind of happened because Ron Spendel, Mr. Mason Bee. I said, you do all these great classes. We never kind of celebrate when they're out in the garden, which is a fun thing. So that's how that all transpired. And then, of course, this year, because it was so cold and wet, we were kind of like, oh, is it going to happen? But we hope to have this be a recurring event.
So in some ways, this is anchored. And I should say, we talked to Ron, and I think Ron didn't quite mention this, but there's probably 5 nesting stations in this small garden.
We have a lot. He has his condominium over here, and then we have and then his new pollinator kiosk with the sliding panels. We have 2 other sliding panels in the garden, and then I believe in addition to that, there's probably 5 or 6 in the garden, including the big bee condominium. So
and so that really kind of anchors things. It creates a real kind of, I was thinking like a cherry festival or something like this is like the festival of this garden. Yeah.
And being an OBA person, a lot of people know about mason bees, so they were kind of like the draw in, how we can suck them in with mason bees and then say, by the way, there's all these other bees. And because I think that happened, that's how it happened for me. I learned about mason bees, and then it was suddenly like, native bees are cool, what else is out there? So anyway, we hope that this, goes on again, and would love to make it an annual event. So we'll see. We've had, not a bad turnout. Publicity is always an issue, and we try to make it. I think one other thing that's important is having events for the family, because parents work during the week and they want to be with their kids on the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had, like the gal I was talking to earlier, she homeschools her daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So she was really thrilled with some of the things they got here. And so anyway, it's just, and you got to get the young people involved and interested, right?
Oh, we talked to Missy Martin earlier, and there was
Yes.
somebody who declared his intention to become an entomologist.
Yes, I heard that. And this kid, it was like the kid, I wonder if it was the same boy that I talked with who was going on and on about how, I know that's a fly and it's a mimic of a bee because the bees sting, and it knows that, if it mimics the bee, then somebody won't eat it, da-da-da. And I thought, he's like a mini Merrick.
Oh yeah, Eric Stanton, one of our
yes.
Who's designing the new Oregon license plate.
Yes. And in fact, if we do this, I just couldn't pull it together, but I would love to have Merrick come and be here and talk with some, I think for kids to just say, you don't have to be 67 to do this. You can be 16 and do this.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. So.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, you are welcome. I'm thrilled that you came up.
Pulling this event together, which is just marvelous.
Oh, well, thank you. It's been a lot of fun, and as a former teacher, that's, I just love education outreach. So, and I love doing the graphics and pulling all that together. So.
I guess a quick thing, plug.
Yes.
This is probably the end of the episode at this point.
Yeah.
If somebody is in Washington County or in one of the counties wants to get involved with Master Gardeners, how do they do it?
Oh, okay. They can go to our website and Washington County mastergardeners.org, and we have information on there on how to become a Master Gardener. And the other thing is to come to one of our 2 demonstration gardens. We have Wednesdays in the morning or work days at the Education Garden at PCC Rock Creek, Thursdays in the morning at the Learning Garden at Jenkins Estate.
So you can just wander in.
You could wander in and just talk to folks and say, hey. And we actually have people who come and they aren't Master Gardeners, but they want to just work in the garden. So we've encouraged, once the COVID stuff clears up a little bit more, Yeah, so it's pretty cool.
Fantastic. Well, we'll have those locations in the show notes, and thanks so much, and
Great.
thanks for organizing this event today.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening. The show is produced by Quinn Sin and Neal, who's a student here at OSU in the New Media Communications program, and the show wouldn't even be possible without the support of the Oregon Legislature, the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, and Western SARE. Show notes with links mentioned on each episode are available on the website, which is at pollinationpodcast.oregonstate.edu. I also love hearing from you, and there's several ways to connect with me. The first one is you can visit the website and leave an episode-specific comment. You can suggest a future guest or topic, or ask a question that could be featured in a future episode. But you can do the same things on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook by visiting the Oregon Bee Project. Thanks so much for listening, and see you next week.